Welcome to Gold Derby. I'm senior editor Denton Davidson, and today I'm joined by the all-star sound team from Baz Luhrmann's Elvis, the epic biopic of Elvis Presley. Wayne Pashley is the sound designer and supervising sound editor. Two-time Oscar winner Andy Nelson and Michael Keller are the re-recording mixers, and Oscar winner David Lee is the production sound mixer. What a crew. I'm so happy you guys could all join me at once. Wayne, I'm going to go to you first. Obviously, when you're working on a film that's so epic and has so much music, it adds another layer of complexity to it. And this is Elvis. So how does the sound tell the story in this film? And how do you even begin to sort of come up with the sonic feel for a movie like this?
Well, I think the big thing with working with Baz is that it's not going to be a straight narrative in any sense of the word. I've worked with Baz for 30 years now. Everything is an iterative approach. I knew that even from the script that it was really, by the time it hits post-production, it's going to be up for grabs. He'll shoot a lot, tends to shoot conventionally, surprisingly enough, but a lot of the magic happens in post. So what he'll do, with Elvis, because it was going across the 50s, 60s, and 70s, and really Elvis and the Colonel were the conduit for a cultural sort of overview of America during that time and the whole cultural change. That was the big deal for Baz, and he basically wanted a sonic architecture that was going to be sexy, gorgeous, and be completely immersive and never stop. So basically with Elvis, and being a great lover of his music and the man himself for all these years, we looked at how Elvis himself as a man, what did he strive for? What did he love? And his love was music, cars, and the audience. So that was the key. That was the beginning. And the audience, the plan on a sound design level was to have the audience be us. So as we watch the movie, we feel that we are actually witnessing Elvis Presley perform today, and that the new audience would take that on and understand the fervor of the crowds and everything else that accommodated the man. Yeah.
And David, you won an Oscar for The Matrix. And as the production sound mixer, you're there on sets. You're capturing sound as it's happening. What's it like from your experience on a production perspective and being there with Baz? And does that influence your work?
Certainly influences my work. When Baz arrives on set, the games begin. And as much as you've planned or had pre-production for the particular scene, all the balls are in the air, and really you've got to, have all your wits about you and pay attention and develop the approach. So it's never, whereas in a way on The Matrix, everything was planned within an inch of its life. We never shot anything that wasn't on the storyboard. And Baz is sort of the complete opposite of that. So all the balls are in the air, and come on, everybody keep up.
But if you're not capturing things on set, everyone's life is more difficult, right? So you're sort of the beginning of this process in some ways.
Sure, yes, I understand. And apparently I have some talent of doing this. The girls from Big Bang were telling me last night. Yeah, no, I've been doing it for a long time, and seemingly I do a pretty good job at capturing primarily dialogue.
Yeah. And Andy,
and I've got a good team, that put the radio mics on and boom operator.
Andy, you're a two-time Oscar winner for Saving Private Ryan and Les Miserables, and a 22-time nominee. That's just incredible. The tremendous success and track record that you have, how do you pick and choose now which films that you want to be a part of at this point, and what made this film a priority for you?
Oh, that's a good question. I don't really pick and choose. They pick and choose me on some level, because when Baz called me to consider doing this picture, I didn't consider it for a second. I just jumped right in because having worked with Baz twice before. Like Wayne, we go back quite a ways. I knew how much fun it would be. I also knew what we would be in for. A very complex mix. And David, credit to you. You captured it beautifully. Makes my life an awful lot easier. And also you got a lead like Austin, who was phenomenal in his performances. And of course, Tom Hanks, always great. So, I mean, you've got some fantastic talent there. And it was every bit the challenge I expected it to be with Baz, but it was incredibly fulfilling. And with Wayne's great team, editorially, it was presented in such a way that it was a joy. And we were able to really just jump right in, with Baz being fully collaborative, as he always is, coming up with many different ideas all the time. Both Michael and I were able to respond to those immediately. And we just hit the ground running. It was great. It was a really wonderful experience, to be honest with you. And I'm very, very glad that it came our direction.
And you've done a few musicals or musical themed films, La La Land, Les Mis, we had mentioned earlier, and way back to Moulin Rouge with Baz. How different is your approach for something like that as opposed to like Saving Private Ryan? Or is the approach different from war to musical, or what's that feel like?
Well, that's quite a question. How long do we have? So, I think the music, look, my heart is, I was drawn to cinema at a very young age, primarily through music. And I've always, whenever I've been offered to do a musical, I jump for joy because they're the greatest. You know, in some ways when you're mixing, you're finding the story, you're finding clarity. You know, I wouldn't say that anything is any, you know, there isn't one genre that's any different to another in the sense that you've got to deliver to the audience the experience of what the story is. It all comes down to story, and story can be told through drama, through music, you know, through comedy, I mean, it doesn't really matter. You've just got to find the essence of what that story is. And for me, musicals are just wonderful because I just think they light up the screen so brilliantly and give you so much joy.
And Michael, as a re-recording mixer, you're taking sound, you're mixing it all together, making sure we can hear all the different parts of your post-production. So what is the most crucial element for you in your position and what the audience sees and hears?
On Elvis specifically, it's the crowds. I think that was the heaviest lifting throughout the film. You know, it starts early on in the hayride where we have more singular girls going crazy for Elvis, and then the medium-sized crowd chimes in. And then once we hit Vegas, that's where all hell breaks loose in a very exciting way. And that's why the crowds were huge, to just support the music. I mean, story and music and Elvis's vocals, they were always king. And then the crowds and everything else around plays the second fiddle. But since Elvis loved the crowd and the crowd loved Elvis, it was a huge player. And Wayne and his team, they brought phenomenal tracks for us to immerse the audience in it.
And what's that collaboration like then with you and Andy? Are you two together all the time, or are you taking pieces and he's taking pieces, or are you just in your own little recording cave sort of matching everything up?
We're together. We prepare the material separately just to get the number of tracks down to a size that we can work with. So that's usually just a few days beforehand that we're working separately. But then once the actual mix of the final starts with Baz, then we're sitting together, and we do jump around between, you know, sometimes I'll just sit and do some music work for a while, and then I'll kick back and let some crowd work and effects work take place, because, you know, it's good to keep handing back and forward. You get a better perspective on the mix that way, rather than just spending too long on one sequence. And but we worked, Michael and I, yeah, we worked well together, I think.
And are you getting pieces throughout the process from David, or are you getting all of it at once at the end and then you just do everything in post?
It all comes in at once when it comes to our hands. So, I mean, David's production track goes to Wayne's team in Australia. They cut the dialogue. They cut any crowd that they could, you know, use from the set. And then Wayne enhances everything in the crowds and the cars and all the environment. And then Barbara Harris brought Loop Group for the crowds. And then at the end, in the final, it comes to us as Andy said, and that's where everybody's in the room, and we basically make one fantastic soundtrack out of all elements. And Andy normally starts off with the dialogue, because dialogue's king. Then the music fills around it, making it all exciting. And then he hands it to Wayne and I, and then we work the crowds and everything else around it to then go back to Andy to fine tune. So it's kind of a back and forth, scene by scene. And that's how we work our way through a reel for, a good 20-minute reel, probably takes a day. And then in the morning, we come back in with fresh ears and play the reel back, like a 20-minute piece, to just not analyze one little section too much, but see a 20-minute chunk. And then we tweak it for a couple hours. And then, normally after lunch, Baz comes in with producers or film editors, and then we play them that reel and do their notes. And that's how we work our way through the movie as a whole. It's like 6-7 reels, spending 2-3 weeks on it. And then at the end, it's important to watch the whole movie as one movie to make sure you're not exhausting the audience or you're hitting the right emotional moments. And that nothing ever has a lull, because everything in Baz's storytelling is exciting all the time. Doesn't matter what you look at, it's always exciting. And that's what we had to hit.
And Wayne, you're jumping throughout the film from decade to decade. Was there any difference in sound elements that you need to push forward and change depending on the location that we're seeing the audience in?
With the timelines for Elvis, it was really about the mainstay of the Colonel and Elvis's story and the drama that was unfolding throughout that period. So obviously the 50s was all going to be about Elvis's rise to fame, the Colonel's introduction, and the drama that involved around that. Now, obviously with the 50s, everything is authentically recorded. That's one thing Baz insists on. The research that we had to do, all of the prop recording, the microphones that were reconditioned for the singing performances, all the vehicles, all the instruments, everything was real. So through each time period, that was a given. And then it was the audiences and how that changed from the 50s through the 60s. There's a period in Elvis's life with the Hollywood years that kind of like that depression. So you're following that story on a weave into that area. And then of course there's the Vegas years, and you now hit the 70s. And so the vehicles were all changing, the bands were changing, the sound was bigger. But the audience and the build was really the thing that was going to be the glue that held this very montage-heavy narrative together to get Elvis's entire life basically into 2 hours, 40 minutes, and the sound was to never stop. That was a main sort of like thing. Baz's words to me were to protect Elvis Presley was the main thing, and to make it triumphant, gorgeous, and awesome. And that's basically what it is. I mean, Baz doesn't make film. He's his own genre, really. He makes opera.
David, for you, what was the most challenging aspect or scene for you in this process?
One that comes to mind, there's lots. One that comes to mind is working with the placement of the radio mics and costumes. CM's very caring or precious about her costumes, and every detail is refined. So my staff, Sophie, the radio mic technician, has to be very considerate in the placement of the mic itself and the packs. So that's always a trick. There was one particular moment when Elvis in a white suit was very difficult to place the mic somewhere and have him perform on stage, you know. But we had to there's 4 people working on this situation. So eventually it was a white mic and it was exposed. And so if it was seen in a close-up, it was painted out or something like that. Probably the main one is that you come in and block the scene, and then you know how you're going to approach it. Mic placements or booms where they're going to go and stuff like that. So it's about thinking quickly. Once you come in and block the scene, everybody goes to work. Lighting starts. Mandy starts, placing the lights, and we start, figuring out what to do. The boom doesn't work. The radio mics have to work. That sort of thing.
I'm just curious, what's it like for you then to see the finished product all come together the first time when you sit down and watch it? What was that experience like for you seeing this film?
It was, in most films, it's a little scary because you worry you haven't got the architecture right. I mean, I tend to think more of the big picture. I often work in long sweeps myself when I'm mixing. Because I know I can go back and get detail, but I always want to make sure that the roadmap is correct for the movie and the architecture of the movie is right. And obviously, when you watch it back for the first time, that's the big thing that I'm paying attention to more than ever, because I know we can go back and we can raise or lower things and we can alter the level or the sound of any particular moment very, very easily in a sense, but you can't always get the structure right. So for me, it's about making sure that we've got the arc and the levels overall. This is a powerful soundtrack, and you don't want to beat people up too much. I mean, one of Baz's instructions in the beginning was that, Elvis has a sort of a punkish element to him in the early days, and he becomes the Velvet Vegas favorite. And so there was that sort of sense of how do you achieve that rawness and realism and then go into the more beautiful glossy kind of effect. So it was about those types of things. And I think that it was, I was very happy the first time we played it all back. We certainly went back and did plenty of touch-up work, but we'd hit the architecture, I think, really, really great.
And David, what's it been like to have the film so well received? Both, I mean, it was a box office hit, the critics are loving it, and I think you have some hardware from the Australian Academy Awards you can show off. If you could elaborate on that.
That was yesterday. Yes. Elvis did very, very well. Yeah, Elvis did well. It's a wonderful feeling to be part of a team. There was 4 tables of Elvis crew, and the cheers and applause that each time we got up. But the process of production is a team sport, and looking at the time, hard work, really hard work. But looking back on it, it's so rewarding. A group of people, and the finished product is very exciting, very exciting. All those elements. Individual elements come together so well.
And just as a final question, sort of to everyone around the table, what inspired you to become part of the sound engineering for film and television business? I mean, it's not something you grew up thinking about necessarily. So I'm curious about how each of you sort of came to think of that as a career option, maybe starting with Mike.
I lucked out. I just fell into this, where I had a friend that was a recordist or mix tech on a dubbing stage in Germany at the Ariflex camera facility. They had a little sound department. And the first time I walked into a dubbing stage, not knowing that not all the sound that we hear is from the set. Obviously, the general population has no idea what we do. And if we do it well, they still won't know because it's all subliminal and just working well. And yeah, I saw it and I said, this is what I want to do. And, and then with lots of help from very talented people, they put me under their wing and they pulled me all the way up and over here to Hollywood. And then, thanks to Andy and Wayne and David and everybody, we get to jam together, and it doesn't get any better than that.
Andy, how about you?
I started, I was fooling around with film when I was a teenager, but I started work as a projectionist in the movie theater when I was 16. And I didn't know how movies were made, but I knew I loved them. And I think what for me drew me into sound was the connection that emotionally you get, mainly with music, to be honest with you. I just fell in love with that sort of sense of it transporting you somewhere else. And I just sort of slid into the sound world through that source. It wasn't a technical background, it was just a love of movies and the power that the sound can make to a movie. I really appreciated that. So I was very lucky to be able to get into that in London, and then moved across to Los Angeles at the end of the 90s, and have not looked back.
And David?
Very young, my best friend was in a band. I'd learned the piano and the trumpet. I didn't join the band, but I did record them and mix them live all the time. I followed a thread of music studios and had some informal training in that. And I chose to leave that, and my first job was at a television station. And not knowing much, I was sent down to the high rating television soapy and learned to be a boom operator. So that's a single Fisher pole, a single handheld pole and 3 cameras. So I learned to run in front of an off-air camera and in and out for dialogue cues. And I thought that's the way it was meant to be. Until a friend of mine went freelance. He said, Dave, they've only got 1 camera. It's really much easier being freelance and working in film. So I moved into film and television and learned, some of my early days, I was fortunate to work with Dean Semler and John Seal. And I learned a lot from those people at that level, and just progressed once and started getting offered jobs as a sound recordist, and it carried on.
And Wayne, how about for you? When did you sort of discover your love for film and decide this is the career for you?
I was very young. The first film I remember seeing with my grandmother was a film called The Lost Horizons. I don't know if you happen to remember that one. And I was absolutely blown away. I didn't know anything about how it was going to be in my career and things, but I knew right throughout school that I wanted to be a part of that magic. And straight after high school, I happened to get a job in picture at the Australian Broadcasting Corporation. I started in the negative room. So I was handling, can you believe it? 18-year-old handling negative and cutting it together. That was crazy. And then I progressed from there into picture assisting. It was 16 millimeter at the time. And on the miniseries things that we were working on, they needed someone to do Foley. I didn't know anything about it at the time, but they had a Foley station. I started doing Foley with the other young assistants on these dramas. And I went back in with picture and did that for a few more years, kept jumping in and out of sound. And I realized at that point that really sound was the thing that I loved. Just like Andy was saying too, the opportunities for storytelling on that subliminal level of music and sound, I thought was just so powerful. And of course, during that time, you had the Star Warses and Kubrick pictures and a wonderful, Spielberg pictures, all that wonderful period of the 80s and 90s. And, that sort of just set the whole, it was a game changer for me. And that's basically been there, ever since 35 years later. Here we are.
Well, congratulations to each of you on Elvis. It's a tremendous achievement. Best of luck with each of you at the Oscars and other upcoming awards. And congratulations on the Australian award you just picked up. And thanks for chatting with Gold Derby today.
Thank you.
Thank you
Thank you
very
so
much.
much.